Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Talks with Tanya. All right. So you know how it goes, when you're your own host, producer, and all of those things. For now, I need to check and make sure that I am broadcasting on all of my channels. Give me just a moment here. And for those of you who are joining, as you join, I want to encourage you to hit that share button, contact your friends and family. For those who need a word, for those who need a word about what's going on in the world today. It doesn't matter where you are. I know I have some friends and family abroad as well, actually around the world, and this is something that is, these topics are things that are impacting us not only at home but around the world as well. Let me just check one other place to make sure that I am streaming to. Just a moment here. So, first question, how's everybody doing? And I mean this very seriously. Welcome. I want to make sure that you're very interactive with us today. I know over this past week, I have gotten more messages than I can handle. So I apologize if I haven't responded to you directly. I am in the midst of, making sure that, oh, okay, we've got some, oops, just a second here. All right, so here we go. So we are on and we are on live. Okay, thank you so very much. You do want to let your friends and family know that they can join by going to Tanya Inspires on Facebook. You want to go to Tanya Inspires on Facebook. Oh, good morning, Kenya. Oh, good morning, Kenya. My sister is here. All the way from California. Thanks for waking up early. All right. For those, we've got a couple of folks that are jumping on the live right now. You want to go to Tanya Inspires. All right. And you can watch the broadcast from there. So let me just go ahead and get started. I usually first I want to give thanks to God for bringing us here for yet another day with the opportunity to use my voice to bring attention to some of the issues that are upon us on a daily basis. My name is Tanya Bain. And I am Tanya from Tanya Inspires. I bring a talk show to you twice a week on Saturday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 p.m. right here on Tanya Inspires. I also stream to Hustle, Slay, Launch. So you can also go to Hustle, Slay, Launch to join us as well. But I am here to educate, to inform, and to influence you by sharing information that is critical. That is critical as we move forward on our journey to whole life success. I am also. I will also take requests for coming to appear on the show. And all you need to do is send a message to Tanya Inspires. And you can reach me there. Go to Tanya Inspires, schedule an appointment, and you and I will have a conversation. All right. Looks like we've got some folks that are having a little bit of difficulty in seeing the broadcast. So just bear with me. Y'all know how it goes. And it's important that here we go. It's important that they see it. Here we go. And then for y'all to share. Okay. Well, let's start first. Breathing. I don't know about you, but over the past, I want to just say few days, but it really has been the past few months. I have really been feeling exhausted, feeling closed in, and just not able to move around like I like to do. But it's turned out to be a good thing. I've been able to focus on some things and concentrate and talk with some folks and arrange some things to really make a difference in people's lives. So I'm happy about that. But I have to say, over the past few days, I really have had moments where I've gone from pretty much business as usual, if there's anything usual right now, to being pretty pissed off and angry. Okay, to feeling like, all of the work that has been done in the past. And I'll tell a quick story. I remember as a child, and I know now what he was doing, my dad was a socialist. And he was a union organizer. And our family has been very much advocates of the community forever. But I remember, grew up in Harlem in New York, and I remember I would go, he would take me shopping with him. And, we'd go to 125th Street to go shopping. But one of the stops, typically at least once a month, was a stop to a brownstone in New York. And I really didn't know where I was going, but it just felt like there was some things going on. And there was always a group of men and women gathered. And the conversation kind of led to actions that they were taking in their community. Who needed a job? Who needed a place to live? Who needed, to have somebody help them be represented in court. And, I didn't think much of it. I just kind of thought it was pretty normal. Come to find out, he was a bit of a subversive. And he was a union organizer, like I said. And what they were doing were making plans to support the people in the community. So, I've got it in my DNA, and understanding that we need to use our voice and our resources for such a time as this to inform and uplift the population. Those of us that are in need, those of us who have, need to share those resources. We need to make sure that we are supporting each other and doing all that we can to move the agenda of supporting your own community forward. For people to watch in silence, especially now, considering, the two prevailing issues in our country, that of the COVID-19, coronavirus plague, as I call it, and also the ongoing plague of racism, which is not new, but for a variety of reasons, has reared a response that is long past due. We can no longer sit back in silence. I was sharing with one of our guests earlier that over the past month or so, I've been receiving this message, it's just in my spirit. It is time. It's time. And, I'm like, okay, well, it's time for me to do more at home, or it's time for me to do, finish some projects I hadn't finished. And I had actually arranged this Talks with Tanya show some time ago, not knowing that the powerhouses that I'm going to bring to you very shortly were going to be at the forefront of the battle itself and the leadership positions, and providing us with some direction on what it is that we could do. So I'm grateful and honored to be able to bring our guest on. I am just going to go ahead and bring him out of the green room. Here we have State Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker. Welcome, welcome. And we have Alicia Clark. Alicia Clark. Hi, Lisa. Welcome, ladies. Thanks for joining. Thanks so very much for joining today. So I just want to share a little bit about both of you with today's audience. And on Talks with Tanya, it's usually a personal story. All right. So I'm going to start with Representative Dorsey, Sherry. So I've known Sherry a long time. And we have had, we've been members of the same church congregation. We have families that have been neighbors. We created a sisterhood a long time ago, and she's oh so encouraging. Even back then, now I remember them and tell this story. You were working for putting something together for what is now Swap Productions LLC, and you were doing a filming, all right, for a film that you were creating. All right. And that's, it's only been a few years, like 2001. I remember that. And I remember going next door, to the home next door and, just watching you work. And, when you walked in the room, everyone was all excited, but you got people's attention and you got us to do what you needed us to do. So I experienced that a long time ago, but, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you who she is. Okay. One of the roles that she plays, Sherry Dorsey Walker, is one of those rare people, a native of Wilmington, Delaware. And she is the first person of color elected to the Delaware House of Representatives from the 3rd District. That is an amazing accomplishment. She is also the first woman and the first person of color to be elected to the 6th District to the Wilmington City Council in 2012. She is, her education background is that she is a product of St. Elizabeth School. Okay, I know, a school that she still supports and represents and puts her hand to the plow there in the community. She also earned her Bachelor of Arts from the University of Delaware, and she earned her Master's in Film from Howard University. Like I said earlier, she has established her company, Swap Productions, and it stands for Sisters with a Purpose, and she is certainly that, okay? And this is just really a vision, an outcome of what Sisters with a Purpose could be. She also conceptualized a documentary, Justice for All. Who would have thunk it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Justice for All. Sherry has worked tirelessly fostering relationships in the business community, with her constituents, with governmental agencies, with schools. She leaves no stone unturned to make sure that the issues in our community are identified, addressed, and resolved. So here is our official welcome to Sherry Dorsey Walker. Thank you so very much for joining me.
Thank you for
And
having
we
me.
also have, this is like my dream talks with Tanya. Uh, we have Alicia Clark, and yes, I'm going to say it, little Lisa. Because that's how I know her. Alicia has been in my life for quite a number of years. I remember Alicia when she was riding the bike on her home in Wilmington, Delaware, on Market Street, and she would ride that tricycle in the house around and around and around. So she's had an energy for a long time. But let me tell you, Alicia Clark is the founder and managing partner of Social Solutions LLC and ANC Enterprise, and they are full service consulting firms. Her personal mission is to work with institutions whose bottom line is a positive community impact. And, for such a time as this and others, this is what I'm going to say is a perfect time to do that. What Alicia is doing is she's using her executive experience, focusing on economic empowerment issues. And regardless of what is going on, if you don't understand that the issues around the economy, our community economy, are extremely foundational to any movement that we make, then you need to rethink, how it is that you're addressing issues. She also works with community-based organizations, and this qualifies her as a social entrepreneur. Yes, I can say the word entrepreneur and change agent who can help you get things done. Ladies, welcome, welcome, welcome to today's broadcast of Talks with Tanya. I appreciate you being here. There we go. Let me just change that so people can see you better. So, welcome, Lynette. Thanks for joining. So, ladies, I want to talk about two issues today, primarily, and they will weave into a variety of things. The first is COVID-19 and the prevailing issues around that, and particularly the issues of COVID-19 and its disproportionate impact on our community. So I'm going to start with you, Sherry. Give us your thoughts on that. Let us know what's going on, in your mind, and also, from a legislative perspective.
Well, thank you so very much for having me on the show. I greatly appreciate it. And we need more platforms like this where our voices are heard and we can reach our communities. To answer your question, one of the things that has transpired is the Delaware Legislative Black Caucus has been actively engaged in ensuring that there are testing sites in communities of color. And we've been doing that very closely with the help of Miss Alicia Clark. There have been pastors who've been very much engaged with this process, but we also know if we did not have a Delaware Legislative Black Caucus, that the priority may not have been there to test communities of color. Yes, it is impacting us disproportionately, The one thing that I want to ensure is that we're not blaming people of color for their own deaths. And what does that mean? It was in the very beginning, you heard a lot of news broadcasts where it was, oh, well, they suffer from diabetes, they have heart
Mm,
trouble. Well, a lot of our heart trouble comes from the trouble that you're currently seeing right now, the unrest, the civil unrest in our country. There are times when we want to say something and do something, yet we rely upon our spirituality and we don't necessarily do the things that we desire to do. And sometimes we don't say the things that we desire to say because we want to try to keep the peace. Because by our nature, we are a
mm.
peaceful people. But what you are seeing right now is the level of disgust with which we have lived. And when you say that, oh, well, people of color are dying at alarming rates, well, that's what happens when there are food deserts in certain communities. These designs that have been set in place to hurt our communities. Now there's a level of frustration that we're not going to be tolerant of it anymore. And what the COVID did is it took racism from being covert and made it very overt. So the
Mm.
COVID is the indignation. But the one thing that COVID did is it took the blinders off, and now everyone can see what we have known for years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When people point the finger, they forget that the other finger is pointing back at them, or the rest of their hand is doing so. So when you talk about the forgetting about what caused the issues that we are having, the lack that we have in the community. Let's just talk a little bit. Let's unpack that a little bit more. We talk about, lack of access, to food. What are the kinds of things are impacting our ability to get our issues or, our needs solved?
Is that a question for me or for Miss Alicia?
For you.
Okay. Well, oftentimes you will hear people in positions of power talk about the Delaware way. And it's interesting, you won't ever hear a person of color talk about the Delaware way in a positive light.
Mm,
But you hear individuals say the Delaware way. Well, the Delaware way is what led us to where we are right now as it pertains to people of color. The Delaware way kept things the same way down through the years. So, unless we're going to talk about a new Delaware way where people of color are welcomed in Dover and in DC, and unless we're going to talk about a new Delaware way where our educational system does not fail our children and our families,
mm,
then let's abolish that from our vocabulary because the Delaware way has not served people of color well at all.
mm. Alicia, from your perspective, and as it relates to COVID-19, where are we? And, what are some of the reasons, why we're there?
Well, again, good morning to everyone watching, and thank you, Tanya Inspires, for the invitation to join you this morning. And I was really excited to be on this session, be with you this morning for this session, especially when I knew that Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker would be here as well. So it's a pleasure. COVID-19. Everything that Representative Dorsey Walker said is right on point. What COVID-19 has done is really expose the
Mm,
underlying issues that were always there, and it has to do with systemic institutional racism and discriminatory practices, and so what's happening in our state right now is reacting and responding to the crisis and to the pandemic. And there are several initiatives underway to try to really wrap our arms around it. Of course, our public health administration and team are engaged in leading the effort. And there are a number of groups and organizations that are working in partnership. The challenge with all of this is when you are dealing with a state that, where there were large disparities that already existed, and there was not an infrastructure in place to really engage communities. Access to healthcare was an issue, and all of those other underlying social determinants are problematic. When you throw a crisis and a pandemic on top of that, it makes it that much more difficult to respond. And then when you have institutions where Black and brown faces are not represented in decision-making positions or seats, then the response often is inadequate and just wrong, And so what we're seeing is some missteps that really could have been avoided had the culturally relevant, culturally competent leadership been in place. And that becomes very frustrating for individuals like myself and Representative Dorsey Walker and others who are working tirelessly to respond in a positive way. So right now, the governor has announced that they are going to roll out a testing campaign, and the goal is 80,000 tests per month, I believe. I'm not certain how that plan is going to be implemented and executed, but those are some of the questions that I'm asking and that others need to continue to ask. And the other, sort of health focus right now is around what they're calling contact tracing, which is to connect with individuals who have been exposed or who have been diagnosed, and attempt to identify who they've had contact with to try to really manage the level of contagious outbreaks. Contact tracing is something that we also need to be closely monitoring and evaluating to ensure that the level of sensitivity and engagement with communities is handled the way it should be.
Mm-hmm.
There are fears and a great deal of distrust that already rest in communities when it comes to public health and medical experimentation for obvious and justifiable reasons. And so again, it requires the right assemblance of people and talent to connect with community in a way that allows us to be effective in that outreach. 200 people, I believe, are supposed to be hired to staff that function.
Mm-hmm.
And those jobs are available. So I hope that our community members, those who are qualified, are applying because they bring to the table that cultural competence that is so important in this process. So all of those things are activities that are taking place in our state right now, and we really need to just pay attention and listen to our community to find out how they're being treated, how they're being handled, are their needs being addressed and met, and then once the big question is, once someone is diagnosed, and are they able to get access to care, and how are they managing through the recovery process? Because it's easy to say shelter in place for some.
Right.
You have a home to shelter in place, and you have food, and you have family who can support you and help you. But what about those who don't have that type of support system, who don't have those resources? What are we doing to ensure their needs are being taken care of? And then, the final thing that I will say, which is really something that we have to really pay attention to. The just the idea of isolation while you are ill and sort of going through, and the mental and emotional health challenges that can present as well is something that needs that we need to pay attention to as well.
Absolutely. The thing that I walk away from what you're saying, and it's also presenting itself, in the issues around racism as we're discussing them or as we're viewing them today, is that we're more reactive as opposed to proactive. And that being said, okay, it's where we are right now. What can you share with regard to, okay, I understand we need to, handle the issue that we have now, but how can we prevent always being in the position where we're trying to fix something and, trying to build something, at the same time? What kind of things can we do, Sherry?
Well, scripture tells us, in all thy getting, get understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that needs to happen is we need to start having open, honest conversation about institutional racism in this state. Because you have people in leadership who are having conversations thinking that the social movements that are taking place throughout our country and basically throughout the world are as a result of police brutality, because their lens does not allow them to see the deep-rooted issues that have caused us to come to this place. But he can't change what you do until he changes what you know. So if you don't know, or if you are turning a blind eye and a deaf ear to the fact that how do we change economically, because this really is about economic empowerment.
Yes, it is.
And how do we shift communities if, as Miss Alicia just mentioned, contract tracers are being hired? How many of those contract tracers will be people of color? And that's a nice amount of money that's being paid to the individuals. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's $27 an hour. So until we start being honest about to whom the state contracts are going, who is getting the jobs with the best benefits, and who has the ability to maintain their household and their communities economically, then we're going to keep going in circles and we'll continue to have social movements, because this next generation, they're not waiting, and they shouldn't have to wait. A lot of this should have already been fixed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. Alicia.
And I'll say, to follow up on that comment, I guess it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I led an effort in partnership with faith leaders and NAACP, and we exposed the racism in state government for, I would say, the second time.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was an article that was written and an expose done by the News Journal in 1994 that talked about the same issues that we were exposing in 2015 and 2016. And so, to Representative Dorsey Walker's point, unless the state acknowledges and has a real truth and reconciliation moment about how things are done and operate, we'll always find ourselves sort of in this place in terms of the leadership and how operations and business is handled in the state of government, in the state of Delaware when it comes to state government. Now, the important factor here is the state of Delaware is the largest employer in the state. So you got to think about scale, and therefore it has tentacles everywhere. As the largest employer, it's a lot of power, a lot of influence, and But because we're such a small state, we also have a wonderful opportunity to get this right, and to really turn this, sort of Titanic, around. But I would also say to my brothers and sisters, we have to get our house in order as well. There's work that we need to do as a community of leaders and Black and Brown individuals, so that we can better control some of the things that happen in our own communities and in our own backyard. And we have not worked collaboratively in the way that we really need to, and focused on the relevant and important issues, and not allow ourselves to be distracted.
Yes.
Because we get really distracted by things that we really should not be paying attention to. And so I am hopeful that coming through the pandemic, and as we move forward, that we will see a greater level of collaboration and partnership with each other. I am launching a statewide initiative, and I'm working along with the Legislative Black Caucus and other organizations. So while we're working collaboratively, we can still be working independently on the things that we have to really take responsibility and ownership of. But there is strength in numbers, and sticks in a bundle are unbreakable. And that's really where we need to focus our effort and attention on. And economics is at the foundation of all of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there were a couple of things that you said, and a couple of words that resonated with me, were exposed. Okay. So what these byproducts of the institutionalization of this perversive racism, we peel back the onion again, and now we're exposed because everyone is exposed. Okay. And so how do we hold people accountable on both sides? Because I heard you, Alicia. I heard you say we need to do our homework, from a community standpoint, but we also need to hold those who we have placed, for the most part, in positions of power. How do we hold people accountable for doing, for moving forward and taking action? Sherry.
The best way is at the ballot box.
Yes.
You vote for the people who have your best interests at heart. If you have a whole state and you have 8 duly elected legislators in Dover, but individuals think it not robbery to appoint a person who is not a person of color to oversee Black outreach, that's part and parcel of the problem. Why is that acceptable? And then we need people of color to look at that in its totality. You have to see that for what it's worth. That does not say I value you as a people. That says I don't think you can control yourselves, or you can control your own destiny. So what I'm going to do is put an overseer in place. That's the message that's sent to us when things like that happen. And then we collectively have to say with a resounding voice, that's totally unacceptable. Regardless of if you're my friend or not, a true friend tells you the truth. So if you have Black friends and you're Caucasian, and if you're African American and you have Caucasian friends, you need to be honest with them. And when you see that your friend is doing, and it doesn't matter what color someone is, if you have a friend who's doing something and you know it's not right, you pull your friend to the side and you say something to that individual, friend, brother, sister, whatever the relationship is, and you make sure they have an understanding. Now, this time around, things have shifted. The Speaker of the House, and I would like to give him credit for something. The Speaker of the House, governor has put together an entity where a post-pandemic entity, and that entity is going to be run by the lieutenant governor and the secretary of state. And there are three parts to it: equity, health, and business. And the Speaker of the House appointed me to the Equity Committee. That's a start.
Mhm.
Recognizing that you need people of color on these committees. And to my understanding, on the Senate side, Senator Tizzy Lockman will be representing the Senate. That's a start. That's our leadership recognizing that we need to be at the table when these decisions are made.
And I would also like to say that you're right. Being at the table is important, and it's a step in the right direction. The issue is that we're not proactive,
Mm.
and so while it's great that the task force and these committees are now being assembled, this could have been done months ago, right? And probably would have been done months ago if the right folks had been around the table to say immediately, this is what we need to do in terms of how we address these issues. We also have to make sure that we are holding folks that look like us accountable who are in Dover, Washington, D.C., or whatever the representation is. Because just because you have a brown face doesn't necessarily mean you are speaking on my behalf and representing my interests. And so, again, it's a two-way street in terms of the level of accountability that absolutely is necessary to ensure that things move forward. And you have to be fearless. One of the great things and beautiful things about the protests that are happening, those young folks are moving and they are fearless. And they're not worried about who's watching, who's looking, their jobs, and all of these other issues that I would say, have been caught up in for obvious reasons. You got to feed your family. So I get it. But there is a level of sacrifice and courage that we have to have in order to move forward, and it has to be more than just a courageous conversation.
Yes.
It has to be tactical, it has to be strategic. And when individuals do not respond in the way that we need them to respond, elected officials or the like, it could be a business or an institution, then we need to exercise our strength and our muscle with our dollars and our vote.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you begin to really move the needle.
I love that. So, we talked about the vote, okay? And the voting strategically is critical as well. What I find is that, for whatever reason, we go in and we just pull the one lever, and we don't do our research about the individuals. Just because somebody looks like you doesn't necessarily mean that they're about you. Okay. So can you share with
Mm.
us, where do we go to understand who it is that we would vote for? What do we need to do to get it right this time? Because we need to get it right this time.
Sure. And I would say, Representative Dorsey Walker and the Legislative Black Caucus is a great example of the work that's required to cultivate new leadership. So she can certainly speak to the number of new members that are in Dover and the representation that we have there now. But there is a growing interest of young Black and brown individuals to run for office, and we need to continue to encourage that. And they need to know what arena they're stepping into so that they can be effective and successful in their campaigning. And then we have to write the damn check. Part of the problem is we don't support candidates in the way that we need to. So it's more than just showing up at a rally or showing up at an event to say, yes, Representative Dorsey Walker, I support your campaign. She needs a check in her fund.
Yes.
Because the funds and the resources are necessary in order to launch the
Absolutely.
campaigns, whether it's at the district level in your city or county, and especially if you're running for a state office. I mean, elections are won with money. And so people are able to win office, not because they are, the most qualified or the most capable or they have the strongest platform. It's because they have the money.
We know that.
And so I'm talking to my Black folks when I say this, in my Latino community. We have to support the candidates that we know represent our interests, and not just in our state. You can write a check for a candidate that's running for office in California if they support an agenda that we know is going to benefit our community of people in California as well. And so that's the, sort of the national and broader way we have to begin to look at all of these issues. And don't get me started talking about Africa and the way we need to pay attention to what's going on over there as well. Okay, because and I'll say this one thing, because now you got me going and it's hard to shut me. I'll say this one thing. What this pandemic has done is I'm hoping that it has shown us how we are connected globally. And therefore, what impacts one impacts others. And as we think about coming out of this and rebuilding, I'm hoping that we're not just looking at it in terms of what we have to do in our local community. That's a given. But let's look at what we have to do to connect with our brothers and sisters across the globe.
Yes.
Right? And how do we build economic infrastructures that are global? That's where we need to be going as well. Okay.
Absolutely. Representative Dorsey, accountability, voting, like what do we need to do? What else do we need to do?
What she said. It's just that simplistic. What Miss Alicia Clark just said. I don't even need to reiterate any of that because she said it so eloquently. And what has to happen is we can't be afraid to have people who look like us to represent us. We cannot give into the things that we have been taught about ourselves. And this goes back to our educational system. This goes back to we can run businesses. We have to be retaught as a people that people of color can in fact be leaders. And we can lead even better than some of the other ones because we're leading, we don't have a spirit of fear. We know that we have a sound mind, and we know that we can rely upon the rock that is higher than I. So we do it a little differently, and we do it differently because we know we cannot be like everyone else. We have to be different in order to bring about the necessary changes. As Miss Alicia stated, you can't just send us down there wherever, whether you're sending us to the city council, the county council, any place in the state house, or to DC. We have to be different. And sometimes that means that we must stand on that island by ourselves. But understand, you can't get anything done by standing on the island by yourself. So while you're on that island, you start bringing people over there with you to help them to understand that this is why our community has this plight. It's systemic. How many people did not want to get tested? Did not want to get tested because they were head of household. And if I test positive, then what becomes of my household? How do I feed my family? We have people thinking that way, and they may very well be positive. You have people walking around communities that don't know that they have the COVID. And then there are those who were tested but feel like, oh, okay, well, it's no big deal. I'm fine. Test results come back. You're positive. You've been around other people. This is an airborne virus. We have to understand breathing is invisible. COVID is invisible, yet we need God to be able to breathe. He breathes life into us. But the COVID is taking life out of us. You see that this COVID is an indignation. And it's also an opportunity to shift things as it pertains to voting. Vote for the people who have shown you that they care. And I'm not talking about just a little press conference. I'm talking about their policies. what does an individual's policies look like? And
Mm-hmm.
has that individual put policies in place to benefit people of color? And if the answer is no, then you really need to be looking for, even if if we don't get it in 2020, we need to be looking to 2022 and 2024, who we can get skilled, trained, and ready for such a time as this.
Yes, sustainability. Yes, in order to make the change and make that change sustainable, all right, we need to operate on multiple platforms.
Right.
I spent a lot of time in corporate America, and I learned a lot there. That was my college right there, and what I found that was done well is they're able to sustain, okay, their practices, okay, be it right or wrong, because they have it built in. They already know who's coming next.
Right.
Okay,
That's correct.
they're not bringing us up. All right, they're sprinkling us in and boxing us out. Okay, and your mom and I know that, so Alicia, they bring us in. They think we're gonna be quiet. We start talking, and then they box us out, fire us, do the whole thing. And still we rise. But it's important as we create this agenda and as we move forward that we handle the situation now, make sure that the policies, if they're not in place, we need to be part of the development of the policies. And then we also need to make sure that we're building that funnel, okay, of those young people who have the energy and really super no fear, okay, to move forward so that they are qualified and prepared. We gotta come out of our pocketbook. Okay, I'm gonna say this. Some people don't ever have to watch me again. All right. But if you spent the money you spent on hair, okay, on giving a piece of that to somebody else, okay, to a contribution, that would make a difference, all right, in your ability to get funding for your business, all right, to be represented someplace else. We need to re-examine not only where we're spending our dollars, but how we're spending our dollars.
Absolutely.
We need to shift our money to the places, economically, where it is that it is going to be used for us. So buy to my current banks. Okay, I ain't even gonna say their names, all right, because effective yesterday, I made the shift. Okay, I made the shift. It's a little bit of dollars, okay, but you can't have it.
Right.
You cannot have it.
Sure. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with thinking and functioning that way. We need to support our own institutions. And if there are not institutions in place, then we need to create them and we need to build them. We don't have a Black-owned bank in our state, unfortunately, but there's one right in Philadelphia.
Yes, there is.
Bank online. So we need to seek out those institutions, financial institutions and the like, that we know are supporting the efforts and the issues that we care about. I want to circle back to a few things that you said, because policies are important, and we certainly need to look at the policies that are existing, as well as what policies are not on the books that we need to push for. And that's where we have individuals like Representative Dorsey Walker down in Dover, and we need to get behind our Black Caucus and other officials that represent our interests and push for policies to be on the books. But it's also the practice, because I don't give a hoot about your policy if it doesn't translate, and I'm being real good this morning because I'm trying to hold my up, but if it doesn't translate to practice. And that's what we have to hold people accountable for, because too often people can point to a policy and they check the box, and then it doesn't, we don't see it implemented, and therefore we don't see any real results and outcomes. Voting is the very first step in civic engagement. When you walk into the voting booth, that's just step number one. You have to pay attention to the offices that are up for election, and not just at the presidential and at your state level, but all the way down to the school boards and judges and your AGs and everyone else that's getting elected. All of those offices are extremely important. And I know everyone is on this sort of Trump bandwagon. Let me just say this. That's the national election, and absolutely we should all, care about what happens at the national level, but you better be paying attention to what's going on in your own state.
Mm-hmm.
Yes and amen.
Because the decisions that your governor, your lieutenant governor, your mayors, your county officials, your city council representatives, the AG's office, all of those positions impact you day in and day out, and your family, real time. So I would encourage you to spend more time focused on looking at the people in your own state, city, county, in terms of their platform, their record, and engage at that level, because that's what you're going to really feel day in and day out. And we have to do more of that, because we just simply don't. And lastly, I will say, with all of the protesting that's been happening, it's wonderful to see the energy that's there. But to your point, Tanya, sustaining that energy, that drive, those conversations are critical to moving the needle forward. But protesting without a plan will go absolutely nowhere in terms of moving an agenda. So you got to have a plan. Mm-hmm. And I'm encouraging my young people, because I've been talking to them all week, as I'm sure Representative Dorsey Walker has as well. Yes, we've got to work with them, and we need to be at the table together talking about how do we recognize and realize this transformative sort of work that we all want to see.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Protesting without a plan will not work, okay? Because it's just noise. And let me just say this as well. That's what people are counting on right now. People are counting on us getting tired, okay? And playing this out, all right? That's what they're counting. They're counting on more of the same. I have seen so many comments, and I've unfriended some people. And I'm actually going to give them a phone call too, that have been making comments like, okay, well, they've already been arrested. Well, there's a disregard for the understanding that this is not about one person.
Right.
Okay. It's about the, 8 or 10 people that have been killed every day, for the past 20 years that nobody even knew about, nobody talked about,
right.
Nobody publishes. How many women of color are missing? Okay. Right. And nobody's talking about it.
Right. It's a culture. It's a culture that has emboldened that type of behavior, which is why that officer could put his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck, because he thought he would be able to do it with impunity. And so we know that happens over and over and over again. And so, and one of the things, to your point about, the women, I had a conversation the other day, and I said, the Me Too movement is real quiet right now. I haven't heard anything from the Me Too movement. Okay. And so, injustice is injustice. And if we are going to be outraged by the attacks and the assaults that women have felt or been subjected to, then we also need to be equally outraged about how Black men are being treated as well. And so I'm saying, as Black and brown people, we have to be very careful not to allow others to co-opt our efforts and to engage us only when it's convenient for them to advance their agendas. And so I go back to getting our house in order, and the need for us to really come together and work together to ensure that we are unified and moving forward, because it's very difficult to sit down and work with others if we have not come together as one.
Yes.
Mrs. Kenya just asked a question, and I would like to answer it. She asked a question on Facebook, Sister Kenya did. And to answer that particular question, our protesters, our peaceful protesters, have been heard. As of yesterday, the mayor and the Wilmington City Council president just gave the peaceful protesters a portion of what they wanted. They wanted a Wilmington Police Review Board. They received that. They wanted body cameras. That's in the process now. There's $800,000 committed to that. And they know that there's some more for which they are asking, and some of that has to come through Dover. Now, because we are in the midst of COVID, I need everyone to understand and hear me very clearly, because this can't end this way. And hear me when I say this. June 30th is our last day in session. That does not mean that we stop the movement. That does not mean that all of a sudden everything stops. Keep the pressure on, because January 1 is right around the corner. January 2021. We need to ensure that we, as your leaders, we are held accountable, one, in doing what you need us to do on your behalf. But the second part of this is we can't do this work without a resounding voice from the community. So continue to keep the pressure on all legislators, because everyone is feeling it. Let me tell you, we as people of color, we live with someone's neck on our knee and their foot on our, their knee on our neck and their foot on our neck daily.
Yes.
That is our daily life. And a lot of times we cannot breathe. We need you, the community, to help us so that we in our totality can start to breathe and breathe freely. It is not by happenstance that God has us wearing masks right now to save us. So understand, please put on your mask. Please go vote for the Christina School Board referendum. We need that money, the $10 million, in order to make a change in our educational system where we have so many systemic problems. But understand, none of this happens without you, the people, voicing your concerns. Because if leadership doesn't see that there's a groundswell of support, then they'll be very dismissive. Miss Alicia and Sister Tanya just spoke to it. There's a whole system in place to ensure that they become governors, that they become Congress members, that they become superintendents, that they become CEOs. Well, where's our system?
Absolutely.
So to Miss Alicia's point, let's start putting our systems in place so that it's no longer they, but we are Congress members. We are governors. We are CEOs. And then we have a system where we can turn around and fund the campaigns of those who look like us so that we can transform our nation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I applaud you, ladies. I want to ask this question. Okay, so we know that, again, it's the multiple levels of engagement that make the difference. Where can someone go today? Okay, or when they see this broadcast, or as I continue to speak, to people, can they go today to become engaged? They've been all out in, on wherever across the country, because we have people on from across the country. Where do they go to find out how they can get to work and, make a difference?
Get involved with the movement.
Yeah,
Get involved with the movement.
Yeah,
Miss Alicia,
organizations.
Miss Alicia's. Oh, go ahead, Miss Alicia.
Yeah, there are a number of organizations locally, and so I don't want to start naming any necessarily, but you could start with one, making sure that you're registered to vote, and paying attention to the primaries and the elections that are coming up. And Representative Dorsey Walker, if you can run through that, because the dates have shifted because of the pandemic. But there are some really important dates that people need to pay attention to, so that they can participate in this upcoming election. But there are a number of organizations located in the Community Services Building in Wilmington. If you go online and you look at the United Way of Delaware's website, there are a number of organizations that you can get involved with. If you want to get involved at the local level in terms of your school district or school board, you call the school district office and they can tell you information about what's coming up in terms of school board elections. And then I would say reach out to your Black caucus and your legislators in your district, and let your district representative or your city council representative know, listen, I'm interested in what's happening in my community, in my state. I want more information. How do I get involved? So you have to take the initiative and start to really fish to determine what's out there, because there are a number of areas where people could get engaged. It depends on how much time they want to spend and really what their interests are.
Mm-hmm. So there's no one that should be left out of the conversation, or no one that should be not engaged, because what I understand now is that it is time. Okay, it is
time.
Long time, long. But we have to take some action.
Absolutely.
We need to make that phone call. Okay, we need to look something up online.
Yes.
All right, individually.
Yeah.
Yes, we look to our leadership for guidance. All right, but it's up to us individually. Get up, look in the mirror, and that's who's going to make the change. Was it President Barack Obama who said, we are the change that we are waiting for, looking for? It's you.
Right.
Okay? It's each and every one of us in our own way.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's my voice. Okay.
Sure.
For someone else, they can drive someone somewhere. Okay.
Sure.
For someone else, they can make a phone call because maybe they can't leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone can do something. We have been gifted by God, and it is our accountability to use what we have. It doesn't have to be the same way as someone else, but everyone needs to do something. Stop talking about it, stop complaining about it, and do something, because they are counting on, in 2 weeks, us not talking about the subject.
Sure.
And if you don't think something else is going to happen, you still have your head buried in the bricks.
Sure. And even
I'll give you a perfect example. I'm sorry. I'll give you a perfect example. We were in the supermarket, and I won't say which supermarket, and it was really only one line open. And I had my mommy with me, and mommy said, oh, this is totally unacceptable. So she asked for the manager, and the manager ended up opening like 3 other lanes. And the store was packed, and there were a lot of people in the store. This was a little bit before COVID. And the young people started clapping, and they said, Mom gets it done. We can follow Mom. And I thought about that, and I said, and there were people, of course, that know that's my mother. They said, oh, she gets it honestly. I watched my mother transform that store in just a few moments, because she said, I'm not having this. Something as simplistic as that resonated with our young people who were watching Mommy get that thing done. And that's what our young people need to see. They need to see that the people who they have positioned in positions of power are getting that thing done, whatever it is, whether it's legislation that is abolishing the use of a chokehold, legislation that looks at the abuse of force. Something needs to happen, but it doesn't need to be knee-jerk legislation. It needs to be thoughtful legislation, that we're working with police unions, and that we have the support of the community. Everyone's not going to agree, but if we work collectively, we can get it done.
And I would say it's also about ownership and accountability as well. Going back to sort of COVID and the pandemic and what it exposed in terms of our vulnerability. Not just those who are disenfranchised and marginalized, but all of our vulnerability, because we don't own things, and we haven't built institutions in the way that we need to. So the economic effort that needs to um, um, ensue as we come out of this is a really aggressive, transformative type of economic plan and efforts and initiatives, where we look at like business development, where we look at how we are financing everything that we buy and purchase, how we're spending our money and our resources, and then who we are supporting at the ballot box, in terms of people getting elected, and where I stand, it's important that we look at the entire political process in a much more strategic, tactical way. Voting straight Democrat has not served our interests, and that vote is always taken for granted. And so, I'm not suggesting who you vote for. What I'm saying is you need to look at the platform and determine who best represents your interests. Because if you are using your money, resources, and your vote to move an agenda, it could be Donald Duck running for office. It ain't gonna matter, or which party, because you have strategically engaged in the political process in a way to move your agenda. And so we need to be issue driven and look at the issues and not look at the party or the individual. Look at the issue and what the person represents, and that is where your weight needs to be given in terms of your resources and your vote.
Yes. We need to be educated so that we understand how the process works. All right. I was always particularly fascinated with how the government works. So I understand that, but most people, it was just like, let me get through class. Okay. Or get out of class, whatever that might be.
I don't even think they teach civic engagement in
Well,
school.
I knew when they took
did
out
at St. Elizabeth,
we were in trouble. But that's deliberate. That's absolutely deliberate. It's not new. Right. It is not new. Right. And unless we take accountability, unless we begin, I'll teach a civic engagement class and I'll teach it in English and in Spanish.
There you go.
Amen.
Whatever it is, we need to take the time to build the systems and the process so that people understand, so that they can move forward. Right. But in the meantime, while we're doing those things and become involved in those things, we need to support you. We need to support the Black Caucus, across the country. We need to engage, internationally to see what's working someplace else, and bring those practices to bear here. This system can be dismantled. It absolutely can be dismantled, but it's up to all of us in the place that we are, to make those decisions in order to make the change. Right. In order to make the change. Absolutely. Ladies, my air conditioning's not on. I need a Black businessman that does air conditioning.
Goodman. Reverend Goodman does air conditioning. We'll make sure you get the number. Yes.
But let's connect. Let's stay connected. Okay. For the audience out there, if you want information to be shared, Tanya Inspires, you can find me. Okay. Find me. Okay. I will find where it is that you might need to go. I will lead you to somewhere to help you get your issue resolved. If you feel like you need a voice to do that, and it's legitimate and straight, I'm willing to speak up for you. And we need more and more people to be able to do that as well. Some closing remarks, ladies. Just give me some closing remarks. And I already know we need to come back and do this again. So,
well, thank you for the invite. This has been great, and I'll come back anytime I'm invited. But I would just like to say that, you know, we really have to build trust within our own family. And when I talk about family, I'm talking about within the, you know, the Black and Latino families, and work together. You know, we have the power and the strength to do miraculous, transformative things if we come together and work together to make those things happen. And we have to always remember, Frederick Douglass said, "Power concedes nothing without a struggle." So it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. And those who are in power want to maintain power.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and so you have to understand the structure and the system that you're dealing with, and be very strategic, be very tactical, and stay the course, because this is a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Stay the course. Stay the course. Representatives, talk to us. Give us some closing words for now.
Yes, ma'am. Well, for those who live in the Christina School District, please find it in your hearts to vote for the referendum on June the 9th. And I need for folks to know, as Miss Alicia Clark mentioned, that July the 7th is the new date for the presidential primary. That's my mommy's birthday. The other date, September the 15th, is the statewide primary, and November the 3rd is the general election. General election. So the 4 dates that I need for the viewing audience to remember: June 9th for the Christina School Board. Actually the school board and the referendum. July the 7th for the presidential primary. September 15th for the statewide primary, and November 3rd for the general election. And I'll leave you with this. There are those who are concerned with the power, the privilege, and the prestige of being in office, but look for those who are more concerned about representing the people.
Amen. Amen. I will close on that. I will put the rest of the dates in the comments, and this recording is going to be available, so you want to make sure that you go ahead and share that. I need to just from the deepest part of my spirit thank you, Sherry Dorsey Walker, Representative Sherry Dorsey Walker. Little Lisa, I'm sorry, I'm embarrassing you, but
Thanks for having us.
Of you. I am so proud of you, and to know that, you know, little did I know that there would be a time like this, that we could work together, you know, to make a difference, you know, to make a difference in people's lives. You know, I'm here. Anything that I can do, please don't hesitate to reach out. To my audience, I want to thank everyone. We've had some great comments, and I just want to make sure that you remember to stay the course. It's up to you. You know, it is up to you. If you want to make a difference, then that's what it is. Stand strong. Stand strong. All right, everyone. This is Tanya with Tanya Inspires. Thank you so very much for joining me. I want you to come back tomorrow at 8 p.m. Tomorrow at 8 p.m., we are also going to have a candidate for Newcastle County Council, I believe it is. Miss Aja is going to be on tomorrow. Next week, Dontel, who is a candidate for
Danielle Hall.
Yeah, yes. For Lieutenant Governor is going to be on 11 o'clock on Saturday. And then on Sunday, At 8 p.m., we're going to have former state senator Constance Johnson from Oklahoma, and she just recently finished a run for the governorship in the state of Oklahoma. She's my college roommate. Okay,
Wow.
who would have thunk it? Okay.
Greatness in that room.
Yes, yes. Oh, yes. So stay tuned this month. I'm focused on making sure that we highlight all of the issues around, our civic engagement, anything that we can do to support the cause. And remember, Black Lives Matter. Stay inspired. Good day. Good night, everyone. All right, ladies. Don't go away.